My marriage to Nora drifted on into 1949. During that time, I tried to get acquainted with my children. A man as involved as I have been with the world's intricacies and my own doesn't have as much of a chance to be with his children as he might like. My particular life is not the usual one, where a man, after an 8-hour day, comes home in the evening and spends time with his wife and kids. My course has been different, and I don't really know what it is to watch a youngster grow steadily from infancy to childhood to adolescence. Still, I have diapered my young, with one of my kids, Sean, by Lily, now aged 18 and old enough to be a good companion. I spend as much time as I can. We meet frequently at airports, railway terminals, and we go together to one place or another. Sean, from early childhood on, came around the studio sets when I made pictures. Nora would bring Deirdre and Rory up to Mulholland, and sometimes my three youngsters were about the place for days and weeks at a time. I staged parties for them, big circuses, I must confess. They had the run of Mulholland Farm, animals to play with, room to romp in, and I tried to keep them amused. We had tremendous fun one day because I couldn't get to work in the usual way. This was one of the few times it snowed heavily in Hollywood. All the roads were blocked from Mulholland to the Metro Goldwyn Mayer studio, where I was working on That Forsyth Woman. The kids were excited over the big snowfall and were looking out of the windows at the white scenery. Telephonic communication wasn't disrupted. I called the studio and suggested an unheard of measure to get to work. They thought it a bit strange and asked time to think it over. They called back and said it was not a bad idea. So a helicopter was sent to my house. The helicopter, a hazardous thing to fly in those days, arrived and landed in front of my breakfast table. I said goodbye to the family amid much gaiety and stepped into the machine. I was promptly whisked through the air to the metro lot, where I reported only a half hour late for work. Otherwise, I might have been stuck on my mountaintop for 3 days. When Clark Gable heard of it and the publicity that chanced to result from it, he said, "God damn, there he goes again, that haywire Flynn." Some of us had an informal film exchange club. Cary Grant had his own library. Gable had his. I'd switch my pictures with Gable, and he'd send over some of his for the amusement of my youngsters, or Abbott and Costello. Then comedies went big with Sean. Then comedies went big with Sean. I'd send over a swashbuckling item for kids, and they'd return a comedy. Robin Hood nearly got worn out. It was borrowed so much. This went on week after week. The children would invite their pals. Families would gather for these private showings. But Abbott and Lou Costello were very good friends of mine. They were having a feud. I don't remember what about. A day arrived when the Costello family were to show an Errol Flynn picture. The family, the kids, Lou and his wife, Lou's mother, some other elderly ladies, were all seated in his projection room. Such nice, sweet kids. They were all properly seated, waiting for the man on horseback to make his appearance and wave his cutlass around, when of a sudden this altogether different picture started to unreel. It was a pornographic film, about as obscene as could be devised. It went on and on. They were paralyzed with shock. Lou couldn't push the button to halt it. Finally, somehow, they got the film switched off. At once, Costello accused Abbott of doing this deliberately. This didn't help their business relationship at all. In fact, it led to trouble with both of their wives. Not only did the comedians stop talking to each other, but now the wives were not talking to their own husband, the other husband, or the other wife. An awful impasse. I don't know who got each to thinking the other was to blame. They both called me and said, "Wait a minute, are you pulling gags again? If this is your idea of a gag..." I swore on the Quran it was not. I. It was not I. But I don't think of myself as a religious person. With so many mouths to feed, and in the manner to which I had accustomed them, I had to keep at the last, as the shoemaker puts it. I had to keep at the last, as the shoemaker puts it. I prepared to go to India to make Kim, having been loaned to Metro Goldwyn Mayer. On my way there, I passed a few days in New York. It is astonishing how I cannot get out into the streets without something happening. I was walking about with a young brunette. She had been rather kind to me, and I wished to do something in return. I walked into a prominent jewelry store, and there was Lily, in the same old tired attitude, her tongue in cheek, eyeing the girl I was with. "Hello, Flynn, buying jewelry?" I said. "Seems we're on the same mission. You're buying it for yourself. I'm buying it for somebody else." I felt entitled to the crack since Lily was making her purchase with my dough. Graham Wan, a friend and public relations man for Warner Brothers, escorted me, on behalf of Warner's, to a formal occasion in Manhattan prior to my leaving for India. We left my apartment early in the evening, took a taxi, and as we moved off, a police car came alongside with 2 cops in it. One officer said, "Get over to the curb." The other asked, "Are you Errol Flynn?" I answered that I was. "All right, get over to the curb and sign this." It was an autograph book. I said, "We're in a horrible hurry, fellow. If you know what's good for you," tough as he could sound, "sign it and shut up." We pulled over to the curb. Graham, ordinarily a very serious, very respectful man, said, "Why, you goddamn New York coppers, who the hell do you think you are? The Gestapo? What kind of fascist action is this?" They bristled at those words. I said, "Jesus, you made us pull over here and practically at gunpoint. Hitler wouldn't do this." This must have aggravated them, for they told our cabbie, "Go down on the 8th precinct." The hacky knew better than to get into trouble with tough cops, and at the station house he kept quiet. We kept asking what we were arrested for. Nobody could tell us. Nobody had anything to say. "What the hell are we here for?" That was me. I made a move to get out of the station to get my lawyer. One of them pushed me towards the sergeant at the desk. That was all. A shove on the back, and the Australian came up. I turned around and stamped with all I had on his instep. It was a grave mistake. Gentlemen, never get tough with a New York cop. Never do it, no matter how right you are. As this guy swung at me, I ducked. I still had my foot on his instep. I swung at him, and that was the last I knew. They beat me right in front of the sergeant. They nearly knocked the top off my head. They battered me up and tossed me into a cell. But not one of them hit me in the face, luckily. But that's about the only spot they missed. By the time I came to, on the cell floor, I was ready to take on anyone. Rage at injustice is common to better and lesser men than me. I said, "Listen, any of you bastards come in here, you'd better come in by 2s and 3s. I went on yelling, completely out of control. I must have looked drunk as hell. I wasn't. I was just enraged. Meantime, Graham phoned my friend John Perona at El Morocco to come bail me out. At first, Perona thought it was another one of my gags, but he came at 4 o'clock in the morning, black hat and all, bearing $500. By this time, I didn't care who came. I was raving. Graham said the sergeant in charge was prepared to let the charges drop. "What charges?" In as loud a voice as I could summon. Quiet, Errol. Let's get the hell out of here." "Bunch of Nazi Gestapo bastards," I kept on. "What kind of a country is this?" As I went out, I walked backwards. Nobody spoke. I was waiting for somebody to say something, for I was certain I would have been thrown back in. I would have fought like a wild cat in a bag. The next day, I was brought up before a woman judge on a charge of assault. But who assaulted whom? I was asked, "Do you think you can go about New York picking fights with police?" I pleaded not guilty and explained that these gentlemen of the police force had forced my taxi over to the side of the road for an autograph, which they both denied. He was disturbing the peace. They lied under oath. I was fined $50. For what? What peace? I paid the 50, then I had to humble myself and make an apology. Officer, I said, I apologize for my action, almost choking on the words. Then I hissed right into his ear. If I ever catch you alone, you yellow bastard, I'll beat your brains out. And I smiled. What? You heard me. Just don't go out alone, sport. The local press made much of this, giving the impression that I had, without reason or provocation, kicked the cop in the shins. In order to plot any kind of mischief, you have first to be interested in the person you're going to hoax. The best gag must always be played on a pal. It's no use hanging it on somebody you don't like. That's not interesting. But to upset a friend, that's different. We were making Kim in India. Paul Lucas, who had recently won the Academy Award for his performance in Watch on the Rhine, is an irascible man who can get sore quicker than anybody I know, and with less reason. But we've always been very good friends. Paul is a Hungarian and a formidable actor. He has an overbearing manner with almost everybody, so I decided I would try to do something about this. He was cast as the Llama, a choice role in this picture, and he was coming in from Los Angeles, flying over the South Pacific, a tremendously long flight, to Karachi and Bombay. For a week before his arrival, I rehearsed a beautiful young Anglo-Indian girl in a rite involving special religious pillars, the ancient pillars of all India. I named her the Flower of Delight, and her role on this occasion was to be president of the Paul Lucas Fan Club of India, which we figured Lucas didn't know about and which, of course, didn't exist. I went out to the customs office at the airport and coached the chief inspector. With his bandolier across his chest and a big gun on the table before him, he looked pretty ominous. There was a corps of soldiers about, with drawn bayonets, turbans, khaki overcoats. For about 50 rupees, I persuaded one of them to let me borrow his uniform for half an hour. With a beard, colored turban topping my 6'2", and some dark makeup, then one quick look in the mirror in the men's room, I saw that I looked very much like one of the Sikh Guard, regular fixtures of the airport. All was ready. Lucas got off the plane and entered the airport customs office. Immediately, the inspector asked Lucas who and what he was. Gracefully, Paul replied that he was an actor, and possibly with as much grace, if a little less modesty, mentioned he had just won the Academy Award, which naturally the inspector had never heard of. What was the reason for his coming to India? What was his reason for coming to India? To make a picture, he explained. Ah, you paint? No. A motion picture, a movie. Ah, what picture? The name was Kim. At that moment, the inspector leaned backwards and loudly asked, "Are you a good actor?" Lucas, he had been through a lot, loosened his tie and faintly admitted he was indeed a good actor. At this cue, the Flower of Delight rushed in and fell on her knees. Mr. Lucas, my hero, at last!" He did a double take and looked downward studiously for her. For her pillars of wisdom were showing, and they were as luscious as all the coconuts ancient India had ever seen. The Indian girl sputtered out her lines about the fan club. Lucas said, Yes, thank you very much." She grabbed hold of his right leg and groveled. "I can't let you go." She kissed his knee. Lucas tried to shush her, but she refused. "I'm alone. My mother has gone to the market with my father. My 2 sisters are not in the house. You must come and stay with me. Lucas will never duplicate his triple take. All the while, he was under crossfire by the inspector. Where had he come from? What about this passport photo, which didn't seem to resemble him? I paced up and down close by, rifle on my shoulder. Once, when he looked around at the kneeling and emoting flower of delight, I gave him a rough shove in the back and whispered something in double-talk Hindustani. Lucas seemed to get smaller. I loomed over him. Now he was attacked from three directions: the flower of delight at his pants cuffs, the inspector from the front, and the rough, tough, bearded Sikh giving him the elbow. Each time the inspector yelled, "Take that woman out of here!" I threw her out. But, as rehearsed, she came back. Her performance was marvelous. Lucas was foundering fast. His tension was almost visible, like marks breaking out on the chart of a radar screen, and I felt he'd had enough. So the third time I shoved him roughly. I allowed my turban to fall to the floor and took the beard off at the same time. Paul gaped, speechless. Rage replaced any possible Academy Award performance he could conceivably have put on at the time. He screamed like a wounded panther, and to everyone's astonishment, grabbed his hat, dashed it onto the floor, and began jumping up and down on it like a human yo-yo. Sometimes these things backfire. I made the mistake of leaving a solid amount of money on the chief inspector's table. He had played his part magnificently. I believe in actors being paid. The inspector glowered. I had touched his Indian pride. "Are you trying to bribe me?" he barked. "What? Good God, no. You are trying to bribe me. Stand over there." He pulled his gun towards me, his hand properly around the handle and the trigger loop. "You're in India, our country. What is this?" His fingers stabbed accusingly at the rupees. I didn't know what to say. I stammered. "Just to thank you very much." "That's not the point. Don't you know better than to bribe a government official?" "Would you gentlemen care to put it in your Christmas fund?" He said, "We do not observe Christmas." I was in deeper. I was there for another hour, trying to double talk for the policeman's fund, any kind of fun, so that I could get out of this place. Later, I told Lucas how the thing boomeranged. He was mollified. Today, he regals any listener with his very different version of the incident. I had not been to India in 15 or 16 years, not since Cates and I bummed our way through that exotic land. It was good, and it was strange to return there. This was on such a different level. Now I met the leaders of India, the Maharajas, the great newspaper publishers, the Brahmins, the politicians. Often, as I sat in the company of these notables, I thought of how I, as a young man, lean, half-hungry generally, sometimes wearing only shorts, my only pair of pants hanging up to dry after I'd washed them, had barged about it in the marketplace of Calcutta looking for action. Feminine, that is. I ventured to tell this one night to the Maharaja of Bundi. This is a state just below the famous Rajpunja, where live the fighting warriors of northern India. I sat with him at an elaborate table he had prepared. At length, he ordered to be brought to the table two small vials of rare drink that he told me had been in his family for a century. The vials contained crushed pearls and fine specks of gold. The liquid in these ancient bottles looked amber. It was the same as Cleopatra was supposed to have served Mark Antony. Or was it the Queen of Sheba whose delicate hand served this to King Solomon? Anyway, said His Highness the Maharaja, this was a fabulous aphrodisiac. I told him I didn't need it on my first trip to India, nor on this return occasion, and I hoped not to need it if I ever came back a third time. There's no imminent fear lurking around the mattress. I added. I drank of that aged liquor and wondered what it would do for me. It tasted sweet, too sweet for my taste, but I liked to see the gold flecks and the pearl specks wander around in the amber fluid as I held the bottles up to the light. Whatever this stuff did for Old Soul or Mark, it did nothing for Flynn. Just a flat calm. Aphrodisiacs? You may have them. I've tested them all. In India, in France, in Spain, in Mexico. Cantarides, or as it is known, Spanish fly. A little cocaine on the end of the penis. A certain root found only in Santo Domingo, which they sell at Ciudad Trujillo, which is supposed to excite the male and female when it is drunk. Actually, I defy anybody to tell me there is an efficient sex stimulant. There's only one aphrodisiac, the special woman you love to touch and see and smell and crush. I left the Maharaja later and went into the streets looking for a cool glass of beer. I put on my false nose. I've always carried with me two false noses. They alter my appearance so that I can sit down and read a newspaper anywhere and be unrecognizable. It is one of the bugbears of being who I am that I have lost my anonymity. I have often missed it. The right to be your own private self is as important as the right to speak your mind. So, in various centers of the world, in Europe or in Asia, when I traveled for my own recreation or went to make a picture, I made experiments while disguised. Parenthetically, here's a tip to all criminals, cads, crooks, and cons. You can't change your eyes. You can change your hair, shave it off, or part it differently, or wear a wig. You can change your mouth by angling it and setting it differently, thus concealing the normal cast of your mouth, or do it a little cosmetic work and alter its shape. But the dead giveaway is your nose. This is the one feature in the human face that can give you anonymity. I had a couple of noses made up in plastic and rubber so that I could turn my nose to left or right, or turn it up at the bottom and reveal wide nostrils. Wherever I put on those false noses, I was able to get away with it. People see you with a distorted nose. They turn away quickly, saying, "Poor guy, must have gotten some trouble to have a nose like that." In Paris, Rome, London, Calcutta, Rio de Janeiro, I have put on my false noses. I could stand at a street corner and watch the world go by as the anonymity was blessed.